Hello, this is DebateSensei NPDA edition. This is where we talk about things relevant to competitive NPDA debate. I have resident expert Gabriel Gravel, the debate coach from SDSU, one of many debate coaches. Thank you so much for being here, Gabriel.
Thanks for having me.
Gabe Gravel, I was saying that today. I'm like, man, that just falls off the tongue really well. You know what I mean? It's like you lucked out on the name lottery, I think. All right. All right. So what I wanted to do with somebody who's very much in the community like yourself is look at actual topics, especially ones that you may have witnessed or debated. And luckily, we're able to do that. We're taking the topic. This is from last year's NPDA final. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And it's that the UN should establish a first contact doctrine for extraterrestrial life. So paint me a little context. What were you doing when this was announced? Like you were at the tournament, you're very embedded and everything like that. What was going on?
So I was coaching SDSU at this NPDA tournament. We made it to the semifinal round.
That's awesome.
The decision took quite a while, so we were waiting there, kind of wondering if we were going to be in this final round. Unfortunately, we weren't. But another team that I've coached a little bit and who my former debate partner coaches full-time was in the round, coaching the Berkeley team that was in the final round. And because of my relationship with him and also with the team in the round, I was in the prep room for a little bit. Admittedly, I didn't do a whole lot of prepping. They had everything pretty figured out. But we were sitting there in the Berkeley prep room waiting for the topic when this topic was announced.
Okay, and they were NEG, you said?
Yeah, they were NEG. The team from UT Tyler was on the AF.
Okay.
And I believe it was the first time that team had hit each other at that tournament. So we didn't have any side or anything.
Okay. Was it do they still flip coins?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do flip a coin. I mean, they probably tell Google to flip a coin now. But yeah, it's usually whichever team had to travel the furthest distance to get to the tournament. They get to call it, and then whoever wins gets to pick after NEG.
Okay, cool. So did they pick NEG? Or did they win the toss or not?
I don't remember. I think they didn't win the toss, but I want to say they wanted NEG anyway.
Okay.
I think that Berkeley wanted to be NEG either way. I'm not sure exactly how the coin toss went though.
Cool. So awesome. And then they get the extraterrestrial life topic. What I was thinking is, let's start with, and now that we've introduced the topic, let's start with how do I phrase this? What a typical person might expect to hear in a debate like this. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could prep this topic from a debating standpoint. But I think immediately this topic is trying to answer the question of what would the United Nations and its constituent countries do if aliens were to arrive or if we were to be contacted by some form of extraterrestrial life. I think that it's kind of a game theory question at its heart, right? What are the intentions or what type of form would extraterrestrial life come in? And then how would we best diplomatically, militarily, scientifically respond to whatever that is? And I think that sort of slant to the topic is still what was held by the teams that were prepping the topic. I think the round didn't end up being about this topic, but when we thought maybe it might be, and we were still prepping the topical strategy, it was very much about like what, from a game theory perspective and a probability perspective, is like the best doctrine that should be adopted.
So So if you kept it in the context of like, you know, ET, what are the odds that extraterrestrial life is hostile? It would be at least part of that, right?
Mhm.
Or they're sort of, yeah. I have that as one topic. I'm a little bit more straightforward, where I'm like, yeah, we should assume that extraterrestrial life is hostile, you know, than AFNEG. And so, but I guess you'd have pretty much the same debate on both of those topics, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was almost maybe assumed that extraterrestrial life at least had a high probability or a substantial probability of being hostile, and it was
Yeah.
more which direction would be the best to address that in terms of a doctrine.
Okay. So does anybody ever get tricky with any of these? Um, well, I guess they did get tricky in this one, right? About the definition. Where did they use their like the sort of jumping off point for to launch into a more sort of critical avenue?
Tyler read a settler colonialism argument that they had been reading all year. The argument itself in the round wasn't too different than the argument they'd been reading at previous tournaments. I saw the argument a couple of times at various tournaments, including earlier at that tournament. Um, I believe that their sort of topical but non topical justification was in stretching the terms extraterrestrial and first contact.
Mm.
Um, in terms of settler colonialism as a history and contact with the indigenous peoples of the Americas, uh, there is, I think, some justification here to say that first contact could be understood in Christopher Columbus coming over to America and the doctrine that was used in first contact with these people. However, I think that it falls apart and it ended up falling apart in the round due to the specific wording of extraterrestrial life. I think that trying to stretch the topic that far proved to be a little too difficult for the affirmative team when faced with the procedural arguments.
So were they playing with the sort of synonym level of extraterrestrial and alien? Is that
I think they were just like so. This level of the debate didn't happen, from my understanding at least. It didn't happen like front loaded into the AF itself. It
mm.
was more responses to the procedural argument that the negative read.
Oh, okay.
So it was a little bit later in the debate, and it was more about the expectations of what we mean by extraterrestrial. Perhaps like we understand terrestrial to just mean the old world or something like that. But ultimately, it wasn't the main argument they were going for, and it didn't end up being the argument that won them or lost them the round. I don't think.
Okay, in a more straightforward approach to this topic, what do you know about any first contact doctrines? Like, I guess I'm asking for a little bit of clarity on plan text a bit. Is there a model that people have, or are there any tenets that people should be aware of? Is like, because first contact, I automatically think of as being like peaceful first contact, but the more I think about it, it could be overtly military first contact. Like, I don't see why that couldn't happen either. So do you have any understanding about what a like a model first contact doctrine would look like?
Well, in terms of policy and like policy proposals and resolutions or anything like that, there really wasn't anything that we
Uh,
could base a specific doctrine off of. There's obviously like plenty of science fiction or more imaginative
that's
descriptions of
fun.
what doctrine could be. Um, and we guessed that if they were to be topical, it would either fall within some sort of either diplomatic or military doctrine, right? It would either be one of aggression or it would be one of like cooperation based on whichever they decided in the round.
Hmm. So like I kind of like those fictional approaches sometimes. It seems like it might be accessible where if you wanted to talk about the sort of ethical framework of, like, let's say Star Trek's policy of first contact, that seemed like it would be a pretty legit debate right there.
Yeah. That was kind of the slant I felt from the idea behind writing this topic, is that there isn't a whole lot on this.
Okay.
So you do kind of have to pull from, those more pop culture references and examples for this round, and apply them to how they would work in the real world, which I think is an interesting way to have a debate and can be pedagogically useful.
Mm, okay. So what are some typical affirmative, like, advantages that people go for on a first contact debate?
Well, I think that the first thing that any affirmative team would have to do on this topic would be to determine whether or not in their plan text they want a doctrine that is aggressive towards or peaceful towards whatever extraterrestrial life is being contacted. And I think based on that, you have kind of the same argument, but maybe a different direction for the argument. And I think the main argument is an advantage that would describe the potential issues that would arise from a sort of first contact scenario. Hopefully, you would want your either peaceful or aggressive doctrine to be able to resolve the threat, the existential concerns of alien contact, right? I.e., if we're peaceful, it convinces whatever extraterrestrial life not to destroy us, or if we're aggressive, we're able to defend ourselves. I think that it's quite difficult to have a very verifiable debate on this topic because we don't have specific understandings of what extraterrestrial life would look like in terms of military capability, or even if we're able to peacefully communicate and have diplomacy in general. The main issue that I think it does directly resolve, however, is the problems of not having a doctrine in the first place. I think that obviously in the status quo,
That's a
if
good
aliens were
argument.
to show up tomorrow, we wouldn't have an agreed upon way across countries of how we're supposed to approach them. And this is also a topic that is touched upon heavily in science fiction. How would different countries react? How would different countries cooperate with one another in sharing information, in coordinating a reaction? And I think that the most obvious ground for the affirmative is kind of cutting through that confusion of no doctrine.
Right, right. I mean, you could even, so you talk about a lot about the scenario of extraterrestrial life visiting Earth, but it also kind of implies certain other programs like the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, like SETI, right?
Mhm.
Like whether or not that program gets funded could be a policy implication of this, right? If you encourage a doctrine of first contact, and just reaching out and contacting them through radio could be one of the ways that you do that. It wouldn't necessarily be an in-person contact. So just whether or not we even let people know that we're here, I think, is the
Mhm.
question, right? People, I say people, of course, but that gets even a little bit more fundamental. I mean, it's like it gets a bit more abstract, I should say, than actual physical confrontation, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely another concern. I think that the if we look at how we're trying to contact extraterrestrial life, then there is almost a sort of informally agreed upon doctrine of trying to contact other civilizations. We've sent, satellites out there with uh,
Mhm.
data and recordings and golden records
Golden
that
record, that's right.
have some information about humanity and Earth. So there is already kind of a policy of let's try to see if anyone else is out there. That also maybe complicates any sort of plan text you might read. If your plan text is one of, let's try to hide and not contact anyone, how do you account for, the satellites hurtling through space? How do you account for the
Right.
various space debris that we've produced? over the years, or
Well,
even just the radiation coming off of the planet.
Right. Well, the aff would be reading a plain text that does the opposite, right? It reaches out more or tries to make more content, right? And so the counter plan, though, would be, how do you, I mean, if you're just going straight up sort of policy debate, that's the type of stuff that comes up. All right. But this wasn't a policy debate. Can you give me a little bit better outline of what the neg said in response to the settler colonialism critique?
So the only off-case position they read was framework position. I don't know the exact interpretation that Berkeley reads, but it's along the lines that you have to defend the action that the plan is specifying, done by the actor that is specified in the plan, and then it has to be fiated, and you have to defend its implementation. This just means we have a topic. If you go into round and you say you don't want to defend this topic, you don't defend this topic, that you should lose because we all agree upon the topic. It's a pretty standard argument. You'll hear it in most critical or KAF rejecting the topic sort of debates. From my understanding, they read a pretty standard framework shell that just outlined the loss in specific ground, the inability to predict the AF, and then the loss in clash education because you're not able to understand directly exactly what they're going to say. They have 25 minutes to prep something that you have to respond to after hearing it. You have 1 minute of flex in between that. So it becomes like a fairness and educational procedural issue. They did also read a number of case turns that I know about. This was more specific to the argument that was being read by Tyler. I don't have the specific arguments in front of me, but I know it had to do with some of their homogenization or potential overcharacterization of what a settler colony looks like. I remember arguments that pertain to the equation of perhaps settler colonialism in Ireland versus the settler colonialism in Algeria and North America that indicated that like distinctions between those things were good and that equating them was necessarily like a bad representation. There's also arguments about the method itself. The method itself that Tyler used, the tagline was neuro decolonization. I don't have a better explanation of what that means, which is where I think some of the offense read by the negative came from. They also problematized the sort of usage of the term decolonization absent the material and physical repatriation of the land or giving the land back, and argued that that was a bad representational model to advocate for.
Yeah, it seems more intuitive that somebody who is establishing a first contact policy would be more likely to link to a settler colonialism critique. It just like, if I were to look at a resolution that says, all right, which side is probably going to link to this more, I'd say probably the AF. You have to do some work to do that. Do you think that played any role in either side?
Well, the affirmative like completely rejected the topic. To my understanding, they didn't advocate for any part of the topic, and they advocated for their method instead. It might be, and it definitely was viewed this way more so, I would say, a little while ago, where people kind of believed even if you reject the AF, voting for the AF is still an endorsement of the topic in some method.
Right.
That sort of idea has diminished quite a bit. I remember getting judges in high school that like believed that specifically, but really very few judges that ever believed that in college. And the reason is because of how the framework debate has progressed in response to rejecting the AF. Because framework is essentially proposing a model of debate in which you must always defend the topic, Answers to framework are reasons why there should be instances you shouldn't have to defend the topic. So the team that is rejecting the topic, the AF, can then leverage poor representations or bad epistemologies or ontologies latent to the topic as reasons why being forced to defend the topic is a bad thing, right? So that very sort of idea that you're getting at, that, you know, anyone who's doing any sort of first contact presumes a very similar like position to Columbus coming over to the New World and dehumanizing and subjugating the indigenous peoples that were on this continent. The AF can then argue that that's a reason in itself why they shouldn't be forced to defend that side of the topic, right? And this, I think, is a unique parliamentary, not unique to Parley, but it's magnified a little bit in Parley because we have so many different types of topics, and we frankly have a lot of bad topics that we have to defend. And sometimes it's a good argument to say we shouldn't have to defend this topic if it's forcing us to debate against parts of our own identity. It's forcing us to debate the value of different marginalized populations, etc.
Okay. So I guess I'm wondering if that becomes the case, and then the affirmative sets out a case that in the context of a debate, and that context assumes that there's supposed to be refutation and clash, doesn't the affirmative just become the authors of the topic? Like they're just replacing one author with another themselves. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I think that that's the broader concern that some people have about being able to reject the topic. I also think that those are all claims that are addressed in the framework shell and are reasons to vote teams down for rejecting the topic. Certainly, the ability to choose exactly what you debate when you want to debate without the opposing team having any knowledge of it is a comparative advantage. I think that framework exists to check this back and give negative teams some sort of leeway into this. Framework is almost a hurdle that every team that wants to reject the topic has to overcome if they want to do it in the first place.
Were they able to do it? Was that their stumbling block in this final round, would you say?
Well, Berkeley's really good at framework.
Okay.
I'm not going to say... I would say Berkeley is good at framework. I think they could have done it certainly against another team, but I know that team, I know their coach, and I know that they really pride themselves on their ability to read the framework argument well, and they did it pretty well in that round.
Okay. Because like I was saying, like if they're doing that, it seems like that the AF might even be like taking the opposite side of the topic and saying that's more fair. Like, you know, like if you frame it well, you know, it's kind of like, take a look. All the reasons they say that they shouldn't have to affirm the topic is also reasons why you should reject them.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, teams make that argument for sure. That's an argument that I made in my career. It's an argument I've seen other teams make as well. It's all sort of hashed out in the round, all these broader thoughts about whether or not you should reject the topic. And the threshold that different judges have for rejecting the topic is very much, it varies quite a bit. There's a lot of judges who don't care about the topic at all and just want to hear you throw down on whatever. And there's a lot of judges that you have to have a pretty high threshold, need some pretty good reasoning and good debating for them to vote for you rejecting the topic.
Okay. Do you think that the level, like, you think presumption plays any role in that? Like, do you have to still overcome presumption if you're putting out a critical AF like that and rejecting the topic?
That's a good question. I think presumption relates to the advocacy, not the topic.
Right. So, like, the burden of proof being on the one who makes the claim, that in order to put the burden of rejoinder onto your opponent, you have to kind of overcome that burden of proof. You have to overcome the presumption, or that the affirmative generally is given the side that they have to like overcome presumption in order to get the debate going, and if they don't, then it's like over.
I mean, I think all that still applies, but I think that the affirmative just shifts all those burdens onto whatever advocacy they're reading, right? So I
Yeah.
think Tyler, especially when they deployed this argument successfully, um, they were able to prove that engaging in neurodecolonization was a method that was able to resolve its impacts, that it did do something, it had solvency, and that it was something worth responding to.
Okay. Now, you said that they had some on-case arguments too. We've been talking a lot about this sort of critical framework and everything like that, but were there other interesting arguments, especially ones that might be a little bit more connected to the topic of extraterrestrials?
Yeah, I mean, so in prep we didn't know if they were going to reject the topic or if they were going to defend a topical AF, so we
Yeah,
prepped both strategies,
right.
and we prepped pretty extensively a dark forest Fermi paradox disad.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know if you're familiar with the
Yeah, the
Fermi
Fermi
paradox,
paradox.
but
Right.
it's that statistically there must be extraterrestrial life, and because we haven't had contact with them, there must be something out there preventing them from reaching a certain civilizational stage to achieve intergalactic travel, or there must be some sort of other extraterrestrial entity preventing them or getting rid of, destroying civilizations that reach that
Right.
stage. And I think that, so we read an argument about that based on the paradox itself, that with the statistics and everything, and we read a counterplan, or we wrote a counterplan that was as in the opposite direction of the plan as we could imagine, which was to ban any first contact and try to reduce the amount of signals that the Earth is sending off that there is any life here.
Oh, okay. That right, and we kind of touched upon that a second ago, right? That would have direct implications on SETI. I don't even know if SETI is still funded. I have no idea. I'll be honest with you. Um, but yeah, that would definitely be one of the outcomes of that is like, all right, no more signals going out.
Mhm.
But then, like, didn't you see the same problem that you mentioned earlier about like how do you actually enforce that?
Yeah, I mean that was a big stumbling block in prep. We proposed. I don't know if you've ever read the sci-fi series, The Three Body Problem,
Huh?
uh, but
No.
in that they develop a pocket dimension where they can hide the Earth from whatever's out there. We wrote a sort of sci-fi counterplan like that. But beyond the sci-fi stuff, it is also important to I want to touch on there is actionable ground and more predictable ground based
Okay.
on the UN itself.
Oh.
The UN is sort of a generic topic area, but there
Hmm.
are consistently, I believe, advantages and disadvantages you can write based on UN action.
Oh, okay.
Um, we mostly read this on the negative in my career, but we would always try to read a UN credibility disad that specifically said increasing the credibility of the UN is a bad thing.
Got it.
It's very generic, just sort of a kind of soft left position that the UN is a puppet internationally of the United States and that they don't enforce things in the ICJ and etc. Justly. But on the affirmative, I think there's also ground to be garnered from saying that the UN is a good actor and that it would spur things like diplomatic and scientific cooperation among its members in order to
Hmm.
do something like the plan, which sort of bases the plan, while still in generics, in more actionable ground.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So uh, I was thinking about how you might be able to like prep that position for lower level debates, and that becomes a tool that they can use, and they're like, oh man, I got something in the quiver, you know what I mean, that I can pull out and use, because it is so generic. Yeah, I mean, like, it gets up there, you know, if you have that prepped out for a bunch of different agents. I think that becomes pretty good. Like, people should know more about a lot of international organizations, the African Union, ASEAN, and man, I'm drawing blanks on some of the others, but there's, it becomes easy. It's just sort of like gaming it out a little bit. You're giving yourself something sort of back up to do that. Excellent. Okay. Well, this is, I love this topic. It's one of the topics that I use in my class. I think partly because it's one of the few topics. This one is framed like a policy topic, but framing it as like on a fact basis, like what should we assume about extraterrestrial life, is one of the few topics that can be like phrased as if it were a fact-ish topic, you know what I mean, and kind of illustrate the different burdens of proof that happen when you rephrase things that way. Yeah. All right. So, hey, that is our time, everybody. We're going to be back, and we'll be talking about. Oh yeah, I think this is actually going to be posted after you get back from Rice. All right. So, good luck on that. You were saying that it's a pretty good. Looks like a pretty good turnout is going to happen.
Yeah, 26 teams so far. That's pretty big for the last couple of years.
All right, excellent. Well, that's a good sign. We were just talking about the membership, and so that's nice. All right. Well, thank you, Gabe, for that, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you.